Okay, let's have a few examples and then I'll show you how things are not quite as straightforward as you might imagine. Right, first example here we got integer I equals 8, j equals minus minus I, so j is going to hold 7 and it's pretty much exactly what you'd expect. What happens here of course is that that value is boxed, and then what happens here is it's unboxed, decremented, and then reboxed and put into j. So it's all pretty straightforward. K equals I plus j. Well, what happens of course is that I and j are unboxed and added together, giving 15, and then that is boxed and put into k. I mean, it's all exactly what you'd expect. L equals I plus j. Well, of course they don't have to be int on both sides, so as are unboxed, added together, and stored as an integer. So it's all straightforward. Boolean b, I equals k equals L. Well, that's going to be true because what happens is the k is unboxed and then it's tested. Binary numeric promotion takes place, of course, so that causes the k to be unboxed, and that's true though, even though the two types are different. So this is where people start to go wrong. When a wrapper class is initialized, the question is, do you get a new object created? And the answer is, it depends. So it's not as straightforward as you think, because if you use a constructor, so you do new, then you will get a new instance created, even if it's exactly the same as an existing one. However, if you use boxing, then what happens is the value of method gets used for boxing, and if the value being boxed is Boolean, byte, or a char in the range 0 to 7f, or an integer or short in the range -128 to 127, then there is a unique object that gets used, and it's cached. And according to the specification, other values might or might not be cached also. Now, the technical phrase is in turn, and that's what's used in the language specification, but actually it's caching. Now, what happens for integer, for instance, and it's pretty much the same for others as well, is this. When you call integer value of int, right, then what happens is if the value here, the int here, lies between -128 and 127, then it returns a value from this cache. And what happens is, during static initialization of the class, this cache is created. It just runs through and creates 256 values are stored in this array here. And it's one of those values which is returned. Otherwise, it actually goes and creates a new one. Now, it doesn't have to do that, but it can, for other values outside this range, it might also be cached. You're not guaranteed one way or another. So that's just something to be aware of, and that will cause some pitfalls, as I'll demonstrate in a minute. Alright, let's look at some more examples to demonstrate the sort of trap that beginners often fall into. Here we've got I and j, two integers that have been created using that type of constructor, so using boxing, so therefore they get the same, I and j are both going to refer to the same object. If we do k equals new 127, that will refer to a completely different object. So now obviously if you do I equals j, that's going to be true because they both refer to the same object, same reference. If you do I equals 127, that will be true as well. If you do k equals 127, that will also be true. And that will be true because what happens is that of course is unboxed. So that's going to be true. But if you do I equals k, that's going to be false. because they point to different objects. You've got to be very careful whether you're very careful with equals and not equals as well, because it is looking, in this instance, it's looking at references. In this instance, it's going to unbox and look at the values. So let's have a look at this. If you do I equals 128, j equals 128, you say I equals j. That may or may not be false. It depends on the implementation. Because here we got two references we're doing a comparison on. However, if you'd put I equals j equals 128, that's going to be true, because in that case the reference is copied. So they both refer to the same thing. Now, these are full of little traps in here. So just to emphasize this, if you do equals or not equals, if it's testing two reference types, unboxing will not be done. Right? You're doing test but reference equality, so you've got to be careful of that. If you want to test the values, the only safe way to do it is to I int value equals j int value, and that's going to test the values, and there's no problem testing the values there. Now, there's one point that's worth mentioning, of course, that wrapper classes for primitives are immutable. That means that somewhere within the class there's going to be a field containing the value. You cannot change that value. Once it's created, its state is fixed. Right? There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to be 128. For instance, in this case, and it will remain 128, and when you no longer point to it, that space will be reclaimed. It has to work like that if you think about it. Now, sometimes it's wrongly claimed that this sort of constructor, I equals 10, for instance, is equivalent to I equals new integer 10. Now, you know from what I said above that that's definitely not the case. One is going to create a new object. The other is going to use one from the internal cache. Now, as a result of that, of course, if you're using new all the time on Boolean constructors, it's going to be really rather wasteful, because there's only two of them that you actually need. Alright, so hopefully that clears up a few points.